Yes. All right. So I want to first of all thank everybody who is here for taking the time to come on out and hop on their devices and to take part in this forum. So this is the first of the sort of meet the candidate sessions with the Bathurst Manor Action Group. And the purpose of this is not to convince anybody to vote one way or the other. It is not to focus on attacking other candidates. This is a forum that is designed to speak to one candidate, ask some questions that were brought together from different community members, and to share it with as many community members as possible, so that we can make an educated vote, as opposed to voting the way some people do, which is, what is the last sign that I see before I go into the voting booth. So today we're gonna get it started off with Kemal Ahmed from the New Democratic Party. So Kemal, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to meet with us. One of the things that I always say, but that does not mean that it is scripted, it is heartfelt, is that I understand and I know how much courage it really does take to put your name forward to run in an election, and it is not something that most Canadians do. So I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for taking that step, for having that courage to run and to be part of the democratic practices in York Centre. It is very noble and very impressive. So I want to thank you for that. We are going to get into some questions, but first I just wanted to open the floor to you, good sir, and see if you had any words of welcome, of introduction before we dive into the questions.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Kemal, and thanks for the great introduction. I've been here since about 2016, and I think it's a really beautiful riding. But I think that during the pandemic, the government has made some decisions that could have been done better. I think I'm now struggling to afford to live in this riding because of rising housing costs and stuff. And so anyways, I just wanted to say, yeah, I mean, I'm a software engineer by trade, and I'm here because I know that this is an important thing to do, that change needs to happen today. So I left that for now, and I'm here, and I think that it's really important that we come together, like not just me. I think that your voices are important, that I listen to people and represent what people want, not just what I want. That's not for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the questions and answering them, honestly.
Great. So let's dive right into to these questions. So the first one is not so much about running for the position, but it's recognizing that you are running for the position here. So why are you running to be the MP for York Centre as opposed to the MP for any other riding in the country?
That's a really good question. I think that, I mean, I like to say that I'm proud to be Canadian, and it's because I'm proud of the spaces. I'm proud of the ecological spaces and the parks and the places and some of the people and some of the opinions. And I really like the amount of parks in New York Center, the amount of green space, and because we need more green space we need to preserve our green space, because it's precious. It's something. It's a resource, and I think it makes a place beautiful. It helps with mental health. You can go to the park, but I think that on top of that, York Center, like I live here, my parents live here, my grandma sister lives here, and she's, I want to help her and make sure that she gets the supports. And I've seen projects in the area, like the Down to Housing project, which, I attended the referendum, and I was really hoping to see other people, other candidates who were interested in it, but I was the only one. And that made me really upset, because I think that we're in the middle of a housing crisis here in Toronto. And I don't mean, I know we're not trying to bash the other candidates, so I apologize. But I'm just saying that I think that I would like to see more representation of the local happenings in politics. We need to make sure, even like, yeah, anyways, I'm rambling, but there's a bunch of different things that I went to that were local, and I didn't see a political representation very strongly. So yeah, at a federal level.
Okay, great. Thank you. A lot of questions that came in were about COVID, as one would expect. So I'm just going to put out a number of things that have been mentioned through the media, and other places as well, that are things that could help in the fight against COVID. So one of the questions was, do you support mandatory vaccination programs being brought in by governments for their employees and for other workplaces?
Yes, I think that, I think people in general should be able to have choices, but when their choices affect other people negatively in an extensive way, that's where I personally draw the line. And I think actually this question is interesting, because my knowledge is that the federal government is actually already in the works on creating a vaccine passport. Sorry, you said I've jumped the gun on that question.
That's okay.
Yeah,
The vaccination
mandatory
program.
vaccines. Yeah, the government honestly has the right to do that if they want to, as long as there's available medical exemptions for people who need that. But in general, we have to. It's a pandemic, and in order for us to prevent spread, we have to have a lot of people. And I think, namely, the government needs to toe the line. They need to lead by example, and have their facilities fully vaccinated. And I think that it still is people's choice whether they want to get vaccinated. It's just that they will have to leave the government. And I think that is, in my opinion, okay.
Do you support vaccine passports?
I do, but I think that we should, we were just talking about this in my team, because the recent news is now they're talking about boosters, right? So I think that what we should kind of say what this passport is going to mean. We should say, definitely the 2 main vaccines should be within this passport and should be mandated within the government. But I think that the boosters, it's kind of a bit too early to tell. It depends on if that's needed. If we need to see a strengthening of efficacy, then we will likely have to add that. But I think for now, I think that the 2 vaccines are sufficient for a vaccine passport. And I think it is a very good thing because immunization records have been around for as long as I've been around, at least. And it's nothing new. We have to have pneumonia vaccines and all these things. Or I may be wrong about the pneumonia one, but there's a list of immunizations that you have to have for you to be able to attend school. So this is not really something new, and I'm fully behind it.
And I guess the last thing that has been mentioned time and again is about lockdowns. Are you in support of those at a federal level?
Actually, can I ask you something? So before I answer that, I think we have a comment, and I'd like to. Basically, Angela has said the Johnson & Johnson is single dose, and you're right. Thank you for that correction. That what I mean to say is the boosters should be like we should determine whether the boosters should be part of a vaccine passport later on. It's really too early to tell, and I'm not a medical professional, so I can't really dictate that on behalf of the party. Sorry about that. No. Regarding lockdowns, I mean, I think that they are necessary, but I think that they work best when they're short and very strict. These really long but weaker lockdowns are very bad for mental health. I mean, mind you, it's better than having no lockdown. And I think we need to figure out a metric as to how long we're going to have these, which I don't, but yeah, but I think for now, like, I think that this is our only option. So yeah, my daddy runs a methadone clinic, and he's seen such a large increase in overdoses because people are inside their houses all the time. So it's really hard to watch, but it's what we have to deal with.
Absolutely. So that segues nicely into our next question, which is about mental health. Mental health has been a huge issue for everyone during the pandemic. It was an issue before the pandemic and will be an issue after the pandemic. How do you and your party think about and address the variety of mental illness issues at play in our country?
It's a really good question. So I think that, I mean, I've seen politicians throw around the word universal healthcare, and I don't actually think that exists yet in Canada, because it needs to include mental health supports, and our platform includes adding that to healthcare. It's a very important part of it. It's a cornerstone, and I am actually personally, I'm disabled and I'm neurodivergent. I have ADD, and there's a lot of issues for me that I'm concerned about. For example, like diagnosis costs, as well as various therapies that are not covered, and they need to be covered, and they're not covered yet. So those are some things which are going to be coming forward from our platform that we will table, and that I really support and personally will fight for.
Excellent. Thank you. How is your government, a government of made up by the NDP, led by the NDP, going to raise funds needed to lower the deficit that has ballooned as a result of COVID-19?
That's a really important one, because there is a lot of debt, and our government spent a lot trying to pay off, these programs to keep businesses and people afloat. And the way that it seems very obvious to me is a wealth tax. We really need to close tax loopholes, and I think the best way to do that is through just a wealth tax. And it's a very high minimum for who that affects. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I think it's going to be really helpful. and there's other things in terms of loopholes that we need to do. So crack down on tax havens, like from the Panama Papers, and boosting the top marginal tax rate 2 points. So putting like a luxury goods tax on things like yachts, private jets, etc. And we're also probably we're planning on rolling back the corporate tax rate cut to the 2010 level of 18% without raising it on small businesses.
Okay, thank you. Staying on the topic of economics and finance, there's a shortage of workers as well as high unemployment. What will you do to get York Center residents back to work, acknowledging that there are those two phenomena?
So we want to definitely invest in this. So part of this is through investing in sustainable industries, and that we're estimating should create over 1 million jobs. And investments in building infrastructure as well as steel and aluminum from Canada are some of those things. And then adding proactive training processes to what the government is providing. And I mean, when we're talking about York Center specifically, I think that we can also talk about, not just jobs, but quality jobs. And right now there's a big issue at the Downsview Airport, and there's a strike going on. I went there a couple times, and they want to move the facilities to Calgary, and they're not being transparent. And this is because there was not a very good agreement. Like there was very little oversight over the Downsview Airport plans and how it would affect the jobs there. And I will definitely be there supporting them, and I will go back to strike with them and join the table wherever that happens.
Thank you. Prices on everything are rising faster than wages. And this makes it difficult for many to afford what they want and or what they need. What measures do you believe, and does your party believe, can be of assistance to a riding that is diverse like ours?
Yeah, and diverse is interesting because, yeah, diverse means diverse types of jobs. So like maybe you are doing multiple part-time jobs. Diverse means just diverse like levels of income and classes. And we want to do a couple things. So first of all, housing is probably the biggest one. We want to create 500,000 affordable housing units and cool down the buying side of things. So by putting a 20% foreign buyers tax on purchases of residential properties by foreign corporations or people who are not citizens or permanent residents. And in terms of other supports, I think that people should not have to choose between, rent, food, and prescription drugs. So pharmacare is also one of the things that we've announced that we are in favor of, and that will be paid off by the aforementioned things, the wealth tax and cracking down and stuff.
Great, thank you. Focusing on an issue that has come in with Afghanistan, but is always something that that the Canadian government needs to deal with, and that is the world's refugees. Do you think that Canada has the infrastructure, and define that as you will, the infrastructure and resources to take on more refugees?
That's an interesting question, because I think that, yeah, like when you have more people in an area, it means increased demand on housing and increased demand on the infrastructure. And, you know, who's going to pay for the rising costs? Well, the thing is that, on the other hand, if you don't bring refugees, there's jobs and positions that typically don't really get filled unless it's by refugees, and bringing in talent from other countries makes for diverse opinions, and I think that's really important. I think that it's important enough that our infrastructure investments that we should increase will be, I don't know if it will be sufficient to justify these increasing housing costs, but it's something that's necessary for us to prevent us from maturing as our population too much. You know, we have to unify our families, and we have to have people from all over the place bringing diverse perspectives. So it's really an issue of our intake system, like not really a question of whether we have the resources. The process is faulty, but we can fix this process so that we can take in more refugees.
Thousands of Canadians are homeless, don't have access to clean drinking water, food. These are massive issues. What would you do, and what would your party do to take the next step towards solving these issues of homelessness, lack of access to clean drinking water, and lack of accessibility to food?
So, yeah, I mean, in terms of homeless people, it's really tough. And I think that adding affordable housing, and affordable housing is this trademark jargon that people throw around, and it does vary from city to city, but it is something which means that it's somewhat subsidized by the government or owned by the government, and there's some sort of agreement. So that is something which reduces the cost of living, so that it becomes more affordable. Now, that doesn't mean that it is affordable to everybody. To be honest, I haven't done a full look on this issue, but I mean, it is a very important issue, and it is growing in our riding. Like, we have homeless people are in every riding, but like we have people in our parks, and I really feel for them, because they need a place to stay, and the shelters are not safe. So that's something which I want to work on, but I need to look into the plans a bit more.
All right, thank you. In our riding, there is a significant degree of concern about the high cost of rent and the inability for people to purchase a home. What is your or your party's plan for addressing the lack of affordable housing for many individuals in our area? I know that you've already addressed a lot of the or some of the affordable housing, but perhaps you want to expand on that part, or simply talk about the rent part.
I mean, I guess, well, I think part of the platform is we start out by doing $5,000 initially for a rent buyback, or I might be wrong on that. But I guess we could talk about locally what is happening in this area. And I think that I'm really in favor of the Downsview Park expansion, which is going to happen probably in 2023. And I think that these housing projects are very good. It's going to be really beneficial, but we do need to be more careful about making sure there's oversight over these projects, like, and transparency. So yes, I like these referendums, but who is it hosted by? Like, if it's hosted by the builder or the corporation who's doing it, then, and when it's being run after things have been established, you know, they were sold in 2019, the land. We're having the referendums in 2021. I think it's great that we have more housing, and it's very important, but if we want to make sure that we're doing things properly, that we have mixed land use and that we have access to amenities, fun things that give you excuses to want to live there. Those are very important things that you need to have whenever you develop land. So those are some things that I would push towards.
Great, thank you. Thinking about our riding, the people, the businesses, the geography, what do you see as some York Centre initiatives that can play a role in combating climate change?
I think that I don't think I really came up with any that are like, I don't think I really thought of any that are York Centre specific yet. I guess, like, I think that definitely, you know, our riding is a transit riding. We have, I think, 4 or 5 subway stations in our riding. And I think right now we have a new line being built in Finch. And I think that this is going to be really good, that if when we're improving transit and in our transit infrastructure, because I saw the reports come out recently about climate change not being 20 years away, but being 10 years away. And that really has me going, we really have to make a change. We have to do something today, and reducing our emissions by at least 50% from the 2005 levels before 2030 is imperative. They say that we need to have peaked before 2025. And yeah, this climate emergency, it's not just a threat to the environment, it's a danger to our health and well-being of York Centre citizens. So I think setting a net target of carbon-free electricity by 2030 and moving to 100% by 2040. And I think that I would also personally work towards trying to push like government fleets to be more green, because if we are suggesting that other people make personal changes, then these changes need to reflect on the government as well. Like, if we think about it, our personal impacts are marginal compared to corporate and government effects on the environment. So we really have to, we can make our personal choices, but the things that will make the most changes are when we push corporations and governments to change.
Thank you. Sticking with the environment, how will you support the preservation of agricultural land for agricultural purposes?
I think that it's an interesting one. I talked to one of my uncles who's a seed rights activist a little bit about this one, and he was saying that it's really important that we do preserve that. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but I know that we need to protect these lands from agribusinesses. So basically, small farmers who have very diverse seeds. It's better that you keep them so that it's like erosion gets really bad if you have monoculture. So it's just better that you let these farms stay small and close to cities, and not let them get in the hands of agribusinesses who may see it as good land to sell afterwards, because then you lose that agricultural land. And keeping it close to cities actually reduces the climate impact because there's less mileage from food transport. So keeping these like giving power to the smaller businesses, that we have in our policy a right to repair act. And I know that doesn't sound related, but it's very, very vital to farmers because they need the right to repair their tractors. So I've been part of the right to repair movement since 2008 as a software and hardware engineer. And if one part breaks down, they literally have to take their tractors to the repair sites, which could be, halfway across the province. And they can't afford to pay for technicians won't come out, and it's very expensive. They literally lose days because they can't do that. And sometimes they say, well, parts not available. Sorry, time to get a new tractor. And then they say, well, we don't have the money, and they have to sell to an agribusiness. So sorry about the longer response, but it's a loaded question, I think.
That's great. Thank you. What is the NDP platform with respect to a national autism strategy?
So our strategy is to work with autistic Canadians to develop and implement a national autism strategy that will coordinate support for research, ensure access to needs-based services, promote employment, and help expand housing options. That's the platform. We need to increase, and part of that means, therapies that are tested and proven and that autistic people are advocating for. Preserving those and expanding those services. That's our platform.
Okay, thank you. With the resurgence of the Taliban, the question of the recognition of legitimate governments has become an issue. Do you think Canada should recognize the Taliban as the government and work with them on foreign affairs matters?
I think that personally, I'm very much not in favor of the Taliban regime and their culture and the way that they treat people and women. But I think that this question, I know that we're asking for a straight answer, but the reason why I can't is because let's look at the converse. If we don't recognize the Taliban as a government, it means that, well, what are we going to do? Does that mean that I need to say that we're going to commit to troops, we're going to do something about it so that we send them out? And, maybe that is what we need to do, but it's really too early on to determine whether we should send troops to take that out, because what the Taliban that we're looking at today is very different than the previous Talibans that we've seen before. These are media savvy Taliban. It could be worse. We need to look at it from a human rights lens before we do anything and say, okay, is there a human rights issue that actually people in the country want us to intervene on? And I think that it's very, very early to tell. I think that if there is a human rights issue, then I mean, I think that, yeah, I think that we should do something about that. But if not, then I think that, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. Our government has incurred immense debt from these relief programs, and we need to prioritize funds before we want to send troops into something which we know very little about. We need to see how this develops.
Thank you. Moving to our last topic, which is about the constituents and about the people in the riding. How will you engage with the constituents in the riding in terms of a plan or a policy for your constituency office?
I think that it's very, very important. I believe, and I believe for a long time, in as direct democracy as possible. I think that my job is really to listen. It's to listen to people. It's to have open ears, and that means you have to be on a lot of forums. I'm on Nextdoor, I'm on Facebook neighborhoods, I'm on all sorts of platforms, and I think that any politician should be on there listening and trying to find out what people need and want. And I have very early on, like I think 2011, I was part of an initiative called Democracy OS, which is a platform where if you are elected, or even if you're not, you can post and say, well, I want to talk about like whether we should vote for X. And you actually let your constituents have a discussion on that before you make a decision for yourself, because really, like, you are working for your local constituents first. And I think that, like, we actually really vote more so on the personality of who's running. And I think that platform is important and representative of your personality, but at the end of the day, it really is who is going to be running specifically, less so the party, I think.
Thank you. And as a last question, it sort of builds off of what you had sort of referred to a little bit in your previous answer. Would you be willing to speak out or go against the messaging and position of your party if and when constituents of the riding make it clear that they do not agree with your personal position on something, or your party's positioning on something?
Absolutely, I definitely would. And I think that this goes to what I said before, which is that, you're working for the riding, and if there was no such thing as, if we weren't working for a riding, then there wouldn't be a reason to have like, this is kind of the whole advantage to having a representation by population system, is that you can actually have local issues represented. Otherwise, I mean, many of the other candidates probably don't even live in the riding, and it's hard to have representation of local issues when you have that. So yeah, I think that you need to have people who, you need to be listening to them, and that is more important than, like, doing what's right and what people ask for is more important than doing what your peers. I think you have to have a bit of guts to go against them, and I've done that a couple of times already, actually. Like, I have already reformed I'm an accessibility technologist by trade, and I already really pushed down hard on our party who didn't want on improving their accessibility standards. And like I'm going to continue to push them to be better, because we can't just, I think that, yeah, loyalty is important, but we need to do a bit better.
Great, thank you. So that that ends our formal prepared questions. So we are going to end this portion. Again, I want to thank you so much for being part of this. As a candidate in the election, and for also taking the time to meet with us in this forum. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope that you find that the rest of the experience in running and beyond is a very positive one. So I want to thank you very much for all of that. We're going to end the recording, but before we do, I just want to remind everybody that we are going to be meeting on Thursday at 7 o'clock with Yara Sachs of the Liberal Party for our next session, where again we'll be asking the same questions and getting Yara's take on all of those different issues. Anybody who does want to stick around, Kemal, I don't know how much time you have today, but anybody who does want to stick around to engage, please do stick around. But we're going to end the recording now.